All right, everybody. My name is Noah, and I will not be talking about squirrels. This is just a fun slide as everybody was filling in. But the presentation is called Don't Wait Until Phi. And we'll start out by explaining who I am a little bit and how we came about this Phi journey with my wife, Becky. So in 2008, 2009, we both received full ride college scholarships for being golf caddies. So very unique scholarship. I'm from Indiana, she's from Illinois. We both lived somewhat close to like country clubs and became golf caddies at the age of like 13 years old. And at the time, like it was a fun summer job. Like there's not many jobs you can get at that age. You get to go be outside for 4 or 5 hours and you get to take home cash. It was all under the table. A little shady, but our parents had a much grander plan to be like, oh, if they do this for a while and like they have good grades in school, like they can get a full ride scholarship, and it's like one of the best deals available. And like we both get it, we both got it, we both ended up at the same college, Purdue University, and that's how we met. And then 2012 and 13, there's a reason there's 2 years is because Becky was a year ahead of me in school. But we both graduated college, no student loans, so like amazing head start there. And then we moved across the country to Seattle for work. So I got hired my senior year to go work at Amazon as a software engineer. And then Becky is a nurse, so she graduated a year early, worked 1 year in Chicago as a nurse, and then luckily moved out with me. And then we bought a house in 2014 in Seattle, so that worked out well. And then in 2014, I also discovered Phi, and Becky was a little skeptical. But going to events like this and just like slowly talking about the benefits and leading by example, I was able to get her on board, and now she's super excited about it. And then 2016 marriage, check that off. And then 2017, so the beginning of 2017, we actually both quit our jobs, even though we're still a ways away from Phi, and took a whole year to travel around the country. So we called that our gap year. And then the beginning of 2018 was the year 2018 was the actual gap year adventure. We quit at the end of 2017. And then 2019, we finished up our gap year and then found some new jobs. So now 6 months ago, we settled into California. I applied to a bunch of different places in a bunch of different states, and then that one made the most sense. And then luckily, Becky is super flexible as a nurse and has a lot of opportunities, so she was able to find work not long after. And this is the map of our crazy gap year adventure. So wow. It looked really nice like for the first half because nothing crossed over, but then we just started going back and backtracking. But we started way up in Seattle, went down the coast, dropped our dog off with Becky's sister in the Bay Area because she was very gracious to watch him for the year. And then we kept going down the coast, Los Angeles, did the Hollywood bus tour, super exciting. And then made our way over to Texas, not too far from where we are now, because a couple of friends of ours were getting married. And then after that, we're like, oh, there's a lot of like parks and cool stuff back west that we missed. So then we turned around, came back. We did the Grand Canyon. We did like the 4 big parks in Utah. Spent a lot of time in Colorado. We have some friends and family there. Did Rocky Mountain National Park. I mentioned a lot of the national parks because that was probably one of the highlights of the whole trip was the dozen or so national parks that we went to all over the country. And then spent most of the summer in the Midwest. Like I mentioned, that's where we're from, so tons of friends and family. It's also the busiest travel time in general, so to kind of get away from that and just lay low for the summer was a pretty good opportunity. And then we did a CampFI up in Minneapolis before heading up through Upper Peninsula, Michigan, through Canada a little bit, Montreal, and then all the way over to Acadia National Park in Maine, and then made our way down the coast, hitting a lot of the major cities, and then hung out. We got the fall in the New England area, which was beautiful, and then we went south because we didn't want to spend any time in the cold, and we had flexibility that we could do that. So then we went down to New Orleans, hopped on a boat because we were getting near the end of our adventure, and we were like, we spent a little less than we thought we would. Like, let's go on an 11-day cruise. So we did that, got to see a bunch of cool countries. It was a fantastic boat, or ship. Don't call it a boat to cruise ship, people. It's a ship. And then we spent the winter and the holidays in Florida with family. And that was basically the end of our travels, and we just kind of beelined it back to Colorado where we spent 2 months. We got an Airbnb for 2 months, and we're like, the goal by the end of those 2 months is to find a job. So got my resume in order, studied up a little bit, applied to a bunch of different companies, went through the process, and then at the tail end of that 2 months, got a job at Netflix in the Bay Area. So we drove there and started working not long after. to wrap up our trip. So yeah, so over 21,000 miles driven. We were just in our little Mazda hatchback, so no RV, no van life. We mostly stayed in hotels, so over 200 nights in hotels. And a lot of that was subsidized thanks to travel hacking and travel points, which I'll touch on a little bit in the future slides. Yeah, so that's the bulk of it. And then this is what we spent. So about $44,000. We had saved up about $60,000 because we had no idea what this would cost. Like we didn't find any examples of people doing anything similar, and we just kind of ballparked like we can probably make it work with this. And we had the flexibility of time, so we always could have left early or extended it. Like we had flexibility. But out of that spending, a lot of it was in food. About a third of it was entirely food, eating out and groceries. Another quarter or so was lodging. So even though we used a ton of hotel points, we still paid for a lot of hotels and optimized promotions and everything else. And about a quarter of this quarter was just the cruise itself. So you could chop that a little bit down depending on how you want to count that. Transportation was just gas. I mean, we had decent gas mileage because it was just in the hatchback, even though it was heavily weighed down. Like, I don't know if you saw on the last slide. We had the giant like roof rack on top, so we had a little extra storage on the trip. And then entertainment, like we just did fun stuff all over the country, like whatever made sense at the time, and then the rest are pretty standard. Others larger than it should be, but nothing too crazy. So lessons from the road. So a few things that we kind of learned and gathered along the way that hopefully we can share with you guys, and maybe you'll take something away from it. But one of our favorite slogans on the trip was "Wherever you go, there you are." Like, you fundamentally as a person are not going to change, no matter if you're here, if you're there, if you're on vacation, whatever else. Like, you're still going to be the same person. And I think the same is true even like when you become FI. Like, you don't fundamentally change. You're still going to have the same concerns, the same anxieties, the same everything else in general. And then super cliche, but like change comes from within. Like you have to work on yourself. No external factor is going to do it for you. Like you can't just reach the finish line of FI and then magically become the happiest person to ever live. It just doesn't work that way. This is us at the top of Angel's Landing in Zion, which was probably maybe our favorite national park, and then probably our favorite hike of the entire trip. Pretty close with Grand Canyon, but it was amazing, and we got a beautiful day for it. And then lesson from the road 2, hedonic adaptation. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but it's essentially the idea that like you kind of have this baseline of happiness, and when good stuff happens to you, it goes up for a little bit, but then makes its way back down to the baseline. And same thing for when something bad happens, you feel bummed out for a while, but you eventually work your way back to the baseline. It's a common reference on FI blogs in regards to like homes and possessions, to where like, yeah, you can buy the fancy new car, but after 2 weeks, you won't even notice anymore. It'll just be like any other car. But I think the same thing applies to any lifestyle changes, whether it's extended travel like we did or FI itself. You're probably going to revert back to that happiness line. So it's the same thing. Like wherever you go, like you're still there. But not all hope is lost. You can potentially increase that baseline over time, but it's going to be through consistent effort, through habits, through a lot of the stuff that was talked about in the last presentation. And potential ways to grow that baseline would be to simplify your life, exercise, find a passion, accept who you are, practice gratitude, and build strong relationships. All of those things, maybe not on their own, are going to make a huge difference, but together, along with other things that we've heard over today and even the sessions yesterday, are going to help you grow that baseline over time and make you a happier, healthier, all-around person. And then the third lesson is that more time does not equal more productivity. That was a big lesson on the road. So the assumption from the past year was that we would get some rest and relaxation, we'd exercise more, I'd write more on the blog. And this is me a couple months before we started the gap year. I had just completed 50 official miles at a 24-hour obstacle course race. I was in the best shape of my life. It was fantastic. And then this is me at the end of our trip struggling to run a 5K because I didn't put any time into it. Like I didn't dedicate myself to actually keep up with my fitness and my cardio and everything else. But like Becky was almost the exact opposite. Like she did not work out a ton or run a lot before our trip, but she really made the time and like was utilizing the hotel gyms, was running on a regular basis, and like she made the most of our extra time in that way. And I also wrote less on the blog, but we did get lots of rest and relaxation. What's that?
Did I beat you at that 5K?
You did beat me at that 5K. It wasn't even close. Yes, and then, so we did get lots of rest and relaxation, so we accomplished that. And basically the lesson here is that regardless of what available time you have, like even if you become FI, if you take a break, if you do whatever else, you're going to have an abundance of time, but you really need to focus and like schedule yourself. You need to make a plan. You need to come up with some way that you're going to utilize that time that helps improve you as a person or makes you better off a year from now than you are today. And the biggest takeaway is something I'm calling blurring the FI line. So if you think of this block as a timeline from left to right, beginning to end, most people, I feel like, at least when they first find FI, it's kind of this black and white. It's pre-FI, we're going to work, we're going to grind it out, we're going to get there, and then post-FI, it'll be a great life, we'll be super happy. And they just like, it's just black and white, just going to grind until I get there, and then everything will be great. And I don't think that's a great way to think about it. Like you want to blur that line. You kind of want it to be, you don't even want to notice, right, ideally, when you become FI. It should just gradually happen, and then one day you're like, oh yeah, I guess like I designed this great life and I don't really need to work for money anymore. And ways that you can start blurring that line is to start pulling things that you're putting off into the future. Like, oh, I can't wait till I'm FI so I can like work out more. I can't wait till I'm FI so I can read more. I can't wait till I'm FI so I can get more sleep, spend more time with family. Like start doing those things now. Like start just pulling them in, even if they're in small amounts. Like make the time, carve out your schedule, and just make it work. And then another thing you can do to blur that line is to push pre-FI work into the future. So I would highly not recommend just grinding it out if you're miserable, if you're not liking work, like if you're just head down, focused on that finish line. That's probably not healthy for a lot of reasons. But ways that you can start maybe extending that FI date a little bit, but making your life a lot happier now, and you'll probably be better off. And one way is to switch to part-time, to where like maybe you're saving a smaller percentage, but you're still saving. Like you're still making more than you spend, but you have a lot more free time. You have a lot more happiness. You have time to do all those things that you're missing out on that you wanted to potentially put off until after FI. And then lower paying passion jobs like a barista FI or coast FI, or there's all sorts of different FIs depending on, but those are great options. And then, or you can do something like we did, like take a sabbatical, take a gap year. This is gonna be highly dependent on what profession you're in. Whether it makes sense to do it or not, or different options, but explore your options. Like you might have more power than you think in your career, in your current job. And if you're a valuable employee, like they'll probably want to stick it out, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or even a year. Like if they value you, like it's much easier to just bring you back when you're ready to come back than it is to go out and find some other great contributor to the company in general. And then, so at the end, FI is not the goal. Like building a better life is the goal. And FI is one way to enable that, but you have to be smart about it. And then preparing for a gap year. So if you do want to do something like we did, I have a few tips. You would have to decide where you want to travel, if you want to travel. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? Like one of the big decisions we had to make was like, oh, do we want to do domestic? Do we want to do international? And we ended up going mostly domestic just because there was so much of the US we hadn't seen yet. And we could keep it really simple. We could just hop in our car and go drive to where we wanted to go. But in the future, I could see us doing something similar on an international thing. Now that we've kind of seen a lot of the US, like maybe we'll go hop around Southeast Asia or Europe or something else. Like those are all options. And that's something you really should figure out, at least at a high level, before you quit your job. And how will you fund your adventure? So that's really important. Are you going to save up cash ahead of time? Are you going to tap into your investments? Are you going to work along the way? Do you have like a remote position or some sort of nomadic lifestyle that can support that? Like how are you going to pay for everything you need on the trip? Lodging, food, transportation, everything else. And then when to quit. So this is really important. One of the reasons that we quit when we did, which was right at the beginning of the year, or Becky quit a little before me, and then I quit right at the beginning of the year because it was right after I got like a stock grant or like a bonus. So it made sense there. And because we quit at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of flexibility as to how we got health insurance and how much we paid for it, which I'm going to get into more on the next slide because that's a huge question. But because we basically quit before the calendar year, we had a whole year of basically no income, which gave us a lot of flexibility to move money around, manipulate our IRS income so that we could have the maximum benefits from that. So when to quit is really important. And then what are you going to do with all your current stuff? So we had a house in Seattle, and we could have sold it. We decided to rent it out, so we found a property manager. And liquidated everything in it. Like Becky quit her job before me, but her new job became selling all of our furniture and goods on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and everything else, which she did a great job of. We ended up with very little once we were ready to actually get out of the house and rent it out. And we just got a very small storage unit for keepsakes, board games, photo albums, yearbooks, the important stuff, you know. And then like our dog. So we had the option of bringing him with us, and like that complicates things. They're not allowed in national parks and stuff like that. But yeah, we found Becky's sister was extremely gracious to watch him for the year. So that was fantastic. But these are just the things that you need to plan. You need to figure out before you think about doing full-time travel or quitting your job. Like just have this stuff kind of lined up. And then how will you get health insurance, which we're going to get into the weeds a little bit for that, because that's a big question. So let's talk about health insurance. We utilize the ACA Marketplace, or Obamacare, because of the subsidies and because of where we were living. So this isn't an option for everybody, and it very much depends on your income. So in particular, you need to pay attention to 138% of the federal poverty level, because if you are below that, you have to be on Medicare, or Medicaid.
Unless you're disabled or over the age of 65.
Yeah, so if you're underneath that, you're gonna be on Medicaid, which depending on your state might be good, might be bad. You have to check that out. And then if you get above 400% of the federal poverty level, then you're not gonna get any subsidies and you're gonna be paying the full rack rate for the insurance. So there's kind of this sweet spot in the middle to where you can get subsidies, and depending on when you quit and what your income profile looks like, you can control your income and then find the perfect subsidy level. So I put the numbers from 2019 to where if you're one person in a household, 138% would be 16,000 and 400% would be 48,000. So you kind of want to fall in that range if you decide that the ACA Marketplace is the right health insurance plan for you. So while we were traveling around, we still had residency in Washington. We got a traveling mailbox with an address so that we could still receive mail and still have residency there. And we got a plan off the Marketplace from Washington, which was okay. It wasn't great. It was basically a backup plan. It was if we need emergency care, we're covered anywhere in the country. But if we needed to do a regular checkup or something more routine, we weren't covered anywhere else in the state. Some states have nationwide coverage depending on which plan you take, and other states do not. So that's important to look into. And the other option that you can consider is changing your state's residency. If you're going to live the nomadic lifestyle, some states make it very easy. Some states make it very complicated to move your residency there. But it's a common thing for people to do, especially if you like, particularly older people that retire and like want to do the RV nomad lifestyle. Tons of great resources online for like the RV lifestyle, and they have tons of great information for like moving your address to South Dakota, because they have great tax benefits, low vehicle registration. They make it super easy. You can do it in like a day. And Texas is actually another popular place to have your residency as an RV traveler. But, so the orange states that I've highlighted here are ones that have not implemented I'm gonna get it wrong. Anybody want to help me out?
That's the Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
So you are,
The orange states have not accepted Medicaid expansion, which means that this 138% may not apply. They're currently using whatever the state's previous Medicaid cutoffs were. And there might be a dead zone area where you don't qualify for theirs and you don't qualify for this. So you have to be very careful with your income if your state hasn't passed, or if the state you choose.
They got rid of the dead zones. You're allowed to buy into the ACA plans if you would be covered under Medicaid, but they didn't expand it.
Okay, that is good. That is good to know. And then, so as I mentioned, like in order to like maximize these subsidies and try to get like pretty close to this line, ideally, if you want to pay very little for healthcare, I think we paid like $200 for the entire year because we moved our income to the exact right level to maximize the subsidy. And that was, we never had any health problems, and we never had to go to a doctor, so we didn't have to worry about that aspect of it, but the premiums were very, very low. But it's the same sort of tricks that you hear about, like to access your early retirement money early. Like you can do a traditional to Roth conversion, and that just counts as ordinary income. So even though we didn't make any money that year, we did a transfer, and that was the money we made that year. And that fit us right in the perfect bracket to get the maximum subsidy. And you can always increase income with Roth conversions like we did. You can decrease income by putting money in a traditional IRA, 401k, and then also increase income by harvesting capital gains if you don't have any traditional or 401k money to roll over. So there's a few tricks there to basically choose your income, choose the one that works best for you based on subsidies or whatever else. And then alternative health insurance are health sharing ministries, which you may have heard about. I'm not a proponent of those and I wouldn't recommend them, but a lot of people are a fan. Just do your research. And then travel insurance. So because we chose to do domestically, we had to deal with all of this shenanigans. If you travel internationally, it's super easy and super cheap. You can just get full coverage throughout the entire globe except the US for a very reasonable rate. So you only have to worry about this if you're sticking in the US. But let's talk about travel hacking a little bit. So if you came to the breakout session yesterday, some of this will be repeat, but bear with me. So my wife and I have opened 73 credit cards since 2014, over the last 5 years or so. We discovered travel hacking in general about the same time as FI, and we're super skeptical. I was like, this seems too good to be true, but we opened one card with the sign-up bonus. We got the sign-up bonus. We spent the points and took a trip. And then that was it. We had the full thing front to back, and no loopholes, nothing fell apart. Nobody knocked on our door and asked what we were doing. It worked, and then we just scaled up rapidly from there. So we've opened a ton of credit cards. We've earned over 3.3 million points and miles just from sign-up bonuses alone. This doesn't include upgrade offers or regular spending or promotions or anything like that. So we've probably earned closer to 5 million. And then most of the credit cards, yes, a lot of them come with annual fees, but a lot of them also come with cash sign-up bonuses. So we're net positive on cash plus a bajillion miles, which very much helped us on our gap year to subsidize lodging. Our credit scores have never been better. That's usually a big concern, but as long as you're responsible with it and you're paying everything on time and not carrying a large balance or a really high utilization, your credit score will probably go up over time. There'll be a short hit right at the beginning, 5-10 points, and then it'll keep going up. So just anecdotally, both my wife and I, when we started this in 2014, we had very little credit history. We both had a credit union credit card for 1 year, and then our scores were in the low 700s. When we bought a house, that was our score, low 700s. And then we've done this for the last 5 years, and our credit scores are now in the 800s. We've refinanced our house. We've opened a HELOC. And they didn't really care that we opened these credit cards. They said hey, why'd you open these credit cards? And we said travel rewards. And they didn't ask any more questions. That was it. And we still got the best rates and everything else. So usually not a concern. I can get way more into the weeds there if you're curious, or you can read my blog. And then most cards that we close are downgraded after a year because if they have annual fees, we usually just get the bonus and get out. But some of them we keep. Some of them we've kept for a while, like hotel cards that give you a free hotel night or something like that. The IHG one's great. The Hilton, not the Hilton one, the Marriott one was decent. And then some of the highlights from spending all of these points that we earned was our honeymoon to New Zealand and Fiji. So this is up in Hobbiton. You see a little hobbit hole in the background in New Zealand, which is amazing. So we took business flights out there to New Zealand, spent 4 days there in a really nice downtown hotel, took business flights over to Fiji, stayed 12 nights on a couple different Fiji resort beaches, very beautiful, and then business class back, and the whole thing out of pocket was $400. If you would have booked the exact same thing, just paying cash, it would have been closer to 14 grand. And I'm not saying we ever would have spent 14 grand, but we'll definitely spend $400 to do that sort of trip. It was amazing. And we did the Southwest Companion Pass. That's a popular travel hacking trick. Open a couple Southwest cards and then get the Companion Pass, and then you and someone else can travel, basically buy one, get one free on all Southwest flights that go everywhere. So we utilized that for a good 2 years. You earn 110,000 miles and the Companion Pass, and we had spent 110,000 miles halfway through having the Companion Pass. We did business class flights over to Spain. This is me hanging out with a monkey on Gibraltar in Spain, and covered all of our hotel nights there as well. And then we've gone to Mexico twice for all-inclusive hotels. So you can actually use Hyatt points to book all-inclusive properties, which are super swanky, very good food, tons of free entertainment and stuff. And we've done that twice. And then this is me and my family, because we got them to sign up for a couple credit cards, and they all got to come with us for free. It was great, sharing the wealth a little bit. But that is pretty much my talk. I'd love to just kind of open it up to questions. I'll even bring Becky up here so you can ask and get the real story. But yeah, any questions about our trip?